hopping from one to the other.
Okay. Yep. All right, so the amended motion is from 1 to 4 on the 27th. Okay. Correct.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
So, as I prepare this memo for next year, is it, well, I just want to leave my notes correctly. So because it's going to be in 2020, it is on Saturday. What I'm hearing is that there's receptiveness to this group to also proceed with that on Saturday at some point. So
Are you talking about next year?
next year in 2020.
Well, I would have the same conversation next year.
Okay, so for purposes of HRC review, there was a comment like, well, next year was on Saturday.
I think it's in general about what is, it's not more racist, but is there race issues surrounding the timing of holiday events? Because all of us are hearing or feel or express tonight that we've heard it or we felt it. And so just to get us input on, doesn't have to be a specific year, like this year it's Saturday,
Oh, I was only asking about the year because I want to give them a deadline.
oh.
So I would ask them,
Do
no,
it before you schedule it for the board next year.
Right, you know, so I'd like to be able to say to them now, we're gonna give you this topic, we'd like to have you come to a resolution, provide a recommendation by May of 2020.
Exactly.
Yes,
Okay,
Yep.
thank you, sorry,
Yeah.
I'll lead with that.
perfect.
But we're gonna start discussing next year.
No, I please make sure that the
Oh my gosh, we're
right.
missing a member, she'll go crazy if we start trying to.
Thank you for that clarification.
All right, so our next item,
9E, consider timeline for prioritization.
Rebecca.
So, hold on, I'm just looking at my screen, go back to my one, we have, prioritization and some meeting dates coming up.
Can you just, is there anything about the process, has the process changed? I think more so than just dates. What, can you just summarize what is, we heard some input from board members.
And two of the most resounding points that came back from last year is that the board wanted to focus on many of the board initiatives and have time to discuss them and then come back at a separate meeting and take action on them. So this,
And statutory committees, I think we talked about that in committee of a whole. Does anyone else remember that? That's how statutory versus non-statutory came about, was this conversation about prioritization. That the statutory committees, CDA, Plan Commission, those initiatives, so as the chairman of Plan Commission, we voted to send it to the board, our recommendations.
so I will be providing you with a spreadsheet that calls out what other commissions have for boards, all of the volunteer committees and the statutory ones, different initiatives that they would like to accomplish in the next year for purposes of evaluating where the staff resources are going to be placed and how we can go about doing that.
Can I ask, just to clarify through the last minutes, I'm pretty sure in the Cal meeting, we talked about statutory committees, like volunteer committees, we talked about they can decide because they're more educational, we didn't really want to prioritize them because they can make up their own agendas for work, but the CDA with housing studies and TIF policy and like the Plan Commission with zoning ordinance changes, those things would want to prioritize with board initiatives. I guarantee it's in the minutes from the Cal meeting. I don't know if everyone still feels the same, but that discussion did happen. And I feel really strongly about that because I think Plan Commission, CDA, design, I don't know what else is statutory, but those, I still as a board member would like to prioritize. Like last year, we talked a lot about CDA initiatives and prioritization. Anyways, that's my thought. Trustee McKay.
I guess what I'd like to do is, process-wise, just confirm the schedule since that's definitely the requests before us tonight. And then if there are process, just given the late time and we don't have a framework to talk about the process, if we could find a way to do that, because it's come up a lot, over and over, and I don't think we're going to make progress on it tonight, to be honest. So if we could just do the confirm the schedule part, but
when I talked, the only reason I'm responding is when we talked in an agenda meeting, this was the time to talk about process.
tonight,
What has changed?
I don't
know
see
if
that
it's
in the memo.
What has changed is how we've outlined preparing discussing it at one end and then coming back in the other. So we would be discussing, different priorities on the 24th, June 24th, coming June 24th.
So
It's in the
board,
memo.
does it say just board initiatives? If it just says that, then it is processed.
The focus was specifically on board initiatives. Now, CDA, for example, the board can ask CDA in terms of how they'd like to proceed or collaborate with them, but they also have some jurisdiction to proceed independently.
But they don't want to do work on a TIF policy if none of us have an interest in passing it.
Sure,
I'm
right,
just saying-
and I'm not
Can we
trying
just
to,
confirm the schedule though?
Yes, but I need to understand, I'm asking questions to understand what is in the schedule, because I don't think there's going to be another meeting. When are we going to talk about what we'd like to see in prioritization? Is it coming in a different meeting? I thought this was our conversation.
well, right, if you want, whether you want to talk about it or not, I'm
Okay,
happy to
if we don't
talk about
tonight, just
anything.
put it on a future agenda.
This is the second time this is.
I know, that's why I'm saying I
And
think
the
it needs
last
to
time we
happen.
didn't talk about it because it was late, and, I'm also fading, but I feel like let's try to concentrate and make our comments really focused and get through it, and talk about it tonight. Because, I don't know when else we're going to, and I'll just say real quickly and try to be quick and focused, is that I think that we do need to, I don't know what you mean by statutory and non-statutory, because parks, conservation, agency are all in statute. So I'm not sure, that I do recall that discussion, but the other thing is that I feel as a village board, our role is not just our own initiatives, that we are responsible for the entire scope of the village government. So it is really important for us to hear if conservation has a solar thing or electric vehicle thing that they feel is really important and they really want to happen, and we need to understand that. And we also need to be where if there's, a parks thing and a public art thing, and they combine, where we can find synergies between, we need to be that sort of, so I feel it's very important that we need, on the 24th, to be looking not only at our personal things, but everything. And then, I know we did discuss having 2 separate meetings, so we could have time to think and come back and make decisions at a second meeting. I personally, for my schedule, if we switched July 1st and July 8th, would work better for me, personally. And I also, on the equipment and vehicle maintenance policy, I don't recall us discussing or requesting a policy on equipment and vehicle maintenance.
I do. It's that schedule of every 3 years, you have to replace the cop car, and every 4 years, it was just a
I
schedule.
know what it is, but I don't think,
I requested it,
okay, well,
just an account, I think.
That came up through the course of last year's budget cycle.
it came up because we decided to not replace a dump truck even though it was on the schedule. But anyway, so, I don't know that we as a board decided that that was a policy we needed to review. I don't recall that.
I think it was just information, so we would have it for the next budget cycle. Like, if we weren't planning to replace cop cars every 3 years because they only had 45,000 miles or whatever, but we just wanted to, I think that's, my request was information as part of the budget. I agree with Trustee Amenta in that I would like to see all the committees, but the problem, and I just want to state it because I need input, is that last year, 3 minutes was not enough to talk about board policy, so board initiative. So if you submitted a transportation and parking study, I submitted that last year, and you submitted an organizational analysis from the manager, by the time you talked about board and management, 3 to 5 minutes wasn't going to cut it. And so either we're going to repeat that same process, or we're going to make more meetings, or we're going to cut the scope back of what we talk about and prioritize. So those are the 3 things that we struggle with, because we did hear the input and we want to try to, that's what I thought we were going to talk about tonight, is that some trustees felt, it was not long enough for our own initiatives and the management. So Rebecca's 6 that she put forward or whatever, which are the big ones, and then and then we had a lot of committee stuff that we also want to include. So I think our choices tonight are, we can repeat last year and have 3 to 5 minutes on board initiative, and repeat that process based on timing, if we included everything. Or we could schedule more meetings, so we have more time to talk about all those, or we can cut back on the scope, because the time allotment of one meeting is a time allotment. So I don't know that, I would like input, because Rebecca and I, we want to make it better. We've heard some.
I mean, I feel like if I had them all laid out in front of me, I think if we each pick 5, that we're going to come in and we have 5 that we want to put forward or discuss. And we're not talking about capital, because capital has been moved to capital planning where it should have been. So we're just talking about policy initiatives, operational things. I think we do need to review what was proposed in 18. Now, there were things that were proposed in 18 that were actually done, like moving the polling location, although maybe that was one we prioritized, I don't remember. But I think there were even things we did prioritize but still got done. So I want to look at what was proposed and what got done. And then what is being proposed. We'll look at everything, but we each come in with just 5 things. And I think that way we can limit the amount of time that we spend.
So that's a great point. So when you say limit 5, which is fine with me, it would be you pick out of your own all the board initiatives and the committee initiatives,
Yeah.
and you bring 5 rather than,
Yeah.
I'm okay with that. I think that
we might overlap, so then we might have confusion.
shows that we like that.
So Trustee Menta and Rebecca, a recap before we go into that meeting of what was proposed, prioritized, what has been accomplished, what still needs to be, or prioritized for the next year, and from those, and then committees, and the only problem is, I don't think you've given that direction. From our COW meeting, I don't think you went to Pet and Bike Safety and asked them to submit, because when Planning Commission did ours, Bart was not under the impression we were submitting to the board. I think the direction given to the committee, so go ahead.
Well, at that time in the scope, one of the things that was verbalized is that the board didn't have enough time to focus on what they wanted to do, and it was too overwhelming to prioritize all the other committees. So we narrowed it down to just be the board. Happy to provide you with everything else. I will be reviewing that and also providing you with my opinion on what we can actually resource to do. So, because that is inherently always the route. We can't do everything in the same year. Just doesn't work out that way. But it doesn't mean that if something doesn't get done in a certain year that it's not important. And I think to Trustee Menta's point, if you see the framework on what initiatives were proposed in 18 and what moved forward and what's in progress, it'll help you just visually, I think, pretty quickly get a glimpse of where you want to go.
But didn't we say, like for Pet and Bike Safety in our COW meeting, you'll see it in the minutes, but that we didn't want to dictate to them because it was more educational, and so we wouldn't need to prioritize their stuff. To see it is good, and maybe if there's a big initiative, someone brings it in part of their 5, but to go over every single one of them.
Well, I mean, I wasn't at conservation, but I talked to a member, and their response to the prioritization was like, why should we bother, because the board didn't prioritize any of the things we wanted to do.
Right.
So I think that, yeah, we don't want to tell them, but it's the same as with CDA. I mean, if we're not supportive of something that they're proposing, then we need to have that back and forth with them. I don't think it matters, if it's the CDA or conservation.
But CDA has staff time, and I think that was the other thing, was more Pet and Bike, I just recalling the conversation in COW, Pet and Bike Safety, conservation, they have educational events and they don't require necessarily a lot of staff time, whereas CDA is staffed by our village manager and our planning director, Planning Commission is staffed by the planning director and the village president. Like, it's much more, those are what I call statutory, so parks, those are all in ordinance, they're not in statutory. So it was the ones that require by statute that we have so much staff.
By state statute,
Yeah.
not by municipal statute. Well,
Yeah.
statutory could be either one.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I meant state statute. But anyways, that's what I remember the conversation, because I would hate to not prioritize something from Pet and Bike Safety and conservation because they're not on our top 5, because there's bigger policy ones, but then feel like they can't move forward with those. That was what we had.
Yeah, we are doing a little bit of a flip-flop And I don't mind, I think it'll work out either way, but, that's why I don't wanna come down really hard on either side, but I think we are flip-flopping a little bit from last year as far as what the feedback was. I don't know what the solution is, quite honestly. I think it's nice to have the context, I think, that's really helpful, but you're right, if I sat through HRC's prioritization meeting and they worked and made a decision, and if that comes to us and we kind of kick it out, I think that that's undermining. But I do appreciate you, wanting to know the context. And I do remember that we said, let the citizen committees, the educational committees do their thing. But we do, if it is involving staff resources, then that is relevant, so.
But it's also departments too. I mean, I wanna know what, if there's an initiative at DPW or police or clerk, I mean, that's.
Absolutely, that makes complete
Because-
sense.
Yeah, we can't limit ourselves to just the things that we individually
Right.
want to do.
I don't think so.
Policy, for
There's,
sure.
because we are responsible for the whole thing.
Yeah, but I think, I like, so if you were describing village board initiatives, department initiatives,
Yeah,
and then as an FYI context, committee stuff,
right.
that makes sense to me. And then out of the village board and departments, we come with our preferences.
And CDA, I mean, like, if I really wanted to,
I don't
housing
know.
study, like,
I know, but
even plan commission, if we wanted to say we want to change the parking, the zoning of parking, say we're done with our study now, and we're gonna prioritize, now we want to move forward with the recommendations. That, they have to be referred to these statutory committees by statute, there's certain things that have to go there. So, it was very helpful as the chair of the plan commission to know that if the board was prioritizing a zoning map change, like they really felt they want more height or whatever, then that was very important. Because that's what Bart and the commission would prioritize, that was the board saying it. But for parks and like conservation, I mean, they can really do what they need to do. But, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'd like to move ahead.
I was just gonna say, it sounds like to kind of summarize that what we want to do is we do want to see everything, but we're going to be very focused in terms of what we bring back in order to accomplish what we need to accomplish within the set of meetings that Rebecca's
Yeah.
discussed. think
I don't
that-
want to add any
Okay.
things to this.
Can I just get your input on one thing that Rebecca and I talked about? So, capital things as trustee Amenta, last year, do you remember, like, it'd be like Oakland Avenue, or, so when we talked, and now trustee Amenta has voiced it, moving capital to long-range financial planning and getting that off, that'll help. And then the departments, we talked about one other thing, the departments, when we say department submittals, last year we had a lot of capital requests, like a laptop or a station, those can go to budget, that's what we had discussed,
Right.
and focus more on like policy, like we want to do data management or something that's more public or more, I don't know how to explain that, but not budgetary necessarily, besides
Conceptual and.
policy oriented.
Yep.
And that's why we moved the long-range financial plan to be before this
Exactly.
process started.
That's perfect.
So,
Thank you for that.
We're on track.
So one of the, just is it appropriate now to talk about schedule? July 8th does not work for 3 trustees so far that I'm aware of. So I'm not sure if that is a good night for you all to do that and make those final decisions.
Okay, can we move that to July
Yeah.
1st and do the maintenance and replacement policy different time? We can put the maintenance and replacement policy in one of the budget meetings,
So I'm comfortable with moving it to July 1st, know that that's also your regular board meeting night. So you would have that time, you wouldn't do any standing committee meetings, and you would just do that within that time frame.
In the cap,
Correct.
I don't even think that time frame is enough.
Well, that's why I'm mentioning it.
Yeah, I mean, it would
I don't
be
know
like-
what you feel is, I'm always trying to trial and error with time.
Whatever we decide on dates, I think it's gonna be important that we communicate with our chairs of our volunteer committees, that if it's not prioritized for And maybe you just make a list, you and the clerk, that just say for these committees, if it's not prioritized, please don't feel that you can't work on things, because we've said that to them already, and I don't want that same negative, they didn't take up any of our issues, so.
I'm one of the people that July 8th doesn't work for, and, any other day of that week is fine, it's just that Monday that is not working for me, but I do think that meeting is important, and I do worry a little bit about having that just be a cow, so I don't know if there's some flexibility, I don't know if it has to be on a Monday, like if it's Tuesday, Wednesday,
Maybe a
Thursday.
special village board meeting.
Yeah, it's a special. It is anyway. Right, so if it is, is that an option to move it?
A different day.
Excuse me, day
I
of the
know
meeting?
that Mike Maher is out of the country,
When?
definitely on July 8th, but I am not aware of his schedule for the rest of the week. He does need to call in on July 15th.
So it's probably gone in between those dates.
So I'm, looking at just at July, we have 5 Mondays in July.
Well, is there a way that we can use July 1st, or I don't know if that, but instead of talking about this policy that trustee Menta just brought up, can we do that in like a budget finance committee on a different day?
Yeah, so you're fine doing it on July 1st, but that's a regular meeting date. So that's when you were concerned about time, not having,
Oh, I see what you're saying.
yeah.
Well, if we
But
make a lot of progress on
You can always
June
do it
24,
More meetings then.
then, I think if we come in with 5 and we, spend the time on the 24th, then the 1st is only a week later, it gives us a little time to ruminate. I think we should try, for the
Sure,
1st.
let's try those,
I think we can do it.
and then move that discuss cow equipment to the finance committee at some other point.
Yeah.
We move it to the 15th.
Okay. And also, no presentations from committees,
Correct.
correct? We're getting all the information ahead of time.
Presentations, just the-
And the chair's gonna be here if we have any
Yeah, I'm
questions.
probably not gonna be here on the 15th either, so I may call in early, just have to skip the meeting, so. But I will, I am here in August, high school sports start up, so we're gonna be back in August, but July I'm probably gonna be out of the state.
So what I'm hearing is the 24th and the 1st, try it there, and if we need an additional meeting, we would look to schedule one, either calling in or,
Yeah,
Figure it out.
yeah.
okay? As long as the process, we all understand, no presentations from committees, we're focusing on, board initiatives, department heads, that she's gonna screen for us to make them more policy oriented, and then,
And I think also what Rebecca did at the end of saying, these are the 5 that I consider the most important. So that's going to be important to have her recommendations, and then the ones that we feel are important in our discussion about our own initiatives, yeah.
can I ask a question about that? So for departments, instead of submitting, can they be filtered through Rebecca and you pick the top 5?
So
that are bigger?
Meeting with department, so this year having the work plans really helps a lot of that, right? So everything's already in queue and we're updating those and talking about them every quarter. So by the end of May, department heads know that they need to meet with me and talk about anything that's coming forward.
So can you take that?
Yeah,
We can
and
do all
I'm
of
gonna
those, but
screen not only
And then you
the
give us
department
your-
heads, but I'm also gonna be just screening committees because some of them require staff time. So, for example, I reviewed some today and, I sent some back and I was like, I need to know how much time this is gonna take. Or there needs to be caps and so that there's a level of expectation of what goes before it or after.
So let me just clarify, so the memo that you provided last year, which I requested of you, and I think it helped us tremendously, but can include 2 sections. One is, you've screened some of the committee work and that it requires staff time, and here are your recommendations because everything filters through you as our manager. And then also from your departments, those are your staff, and you would then be the best judge of, out of all of these, document management. I'm gonna give you an example, it would be one of my top 5 or top. So we can also see their initiatives, but that you're
Oh,
recommending from
absolutely.
your staff,
Yeah.
one person's telling the board what.
So one of the things that I want to have out to this week, it didn't happen last week because there was, the flurry for the board last week was intense. But, so to trustee Menta's point, I loved her suggestion about just providing the framework. So I have a spreadsheet going that's hyperlinked into all the other initiatives. So I just need to round out on some committee ones, and I'm seeing that all the committees are done, but I hope to at least have some sense of where the committees are by the end of May. So I want to get that out to you also, you know, with anything that we have and inclusive. I'll give it to you now, this week, with the understanding that it's not complete yet. So I'm still waiting for department heads to finalize, but just to kind of show you what I'm looking at. And so that as you like think you're, you know, through the process of if you want to submit anything, you know, and you can, I mean, but I ask that you just reach out to me. If you think that you're going to submit on something and please reach out, because I can at least share with you what I do know about whether it is or if there's synergy with another area. Because from June 1st to 14th, your responsibility then is submit those forms to me. And then if I get all of them on June 14th, it's gonna be a really tough turnaround time for me to provide feedback to you on what resources are available or how something could look.
That's true.
So the more communication, the better. Call me at any time.
Great, and when we present our initiatives in our 5, we'll have that information about staff time, and so we'll know for each other.
I really like when Trustee Mento was talking to me about that, about kind of laying out, you know, because I think she hit the nail on the head when it's like, you know, just because you don't move forward with something next year, it doesn't mean that that's bad, right? And it doesn't mean that you lose it. It's still within this framework, you know, maybe it didn't have the right timing, or there wasn't the good momentum, so, you know, other things, you can't do everything at once.
Well, the housing
you know?
study for CDA, we have prioritized, and it'll really help if you can get that to us sooner than later of what Trustee meant to ask for. Like, we haven't moved forward with it, so we have to reprioritize that.
Well, we have a draft that's going to CDA at their next meeting.
But the work would happen still, it's an initiative for 2020.
We would actually make this
Oh,
year.
okay, in
Yeah.
finance, okay.
So we're on,
Okay.
we're on.
If it weren't, then that would be, you know, we would want to roll it into.
Yeah, no, but so, and that will give us that process, and I can talk through with you, if you don't see something on there, I can maybe help, you know, clue in terms of what happened.
What happened to that
or-
one? I thought we
yeah.
we prioritized.
Yeah.
Okay, Trustee McKay. You want
Is
to
there
make a motion?
anything, did we kind of get to the thing? Because I can clearly see that the housing study is a priority, but I don't know that we're going to get confirmation on it tonight. So is there anything else on this, what's before us tonight?
Do we need a motion for this?
No, we just need to
Okay.
confirm.
Yep.
Yeah, so I'm gonna adjust the dates, June 8th, or July 8th is gonna fall off. July 1st, Cal is gonna come on to be designated only for, village board, action. So just know that that will be like action, providing direction, how you wanna see, what priorities you wanna proceed with for next year.
Okay, good.
And you'll provide to us as soon as you have available both the initiatives from last year with a update of where they stand, and then the,
Yeah, you'll get the
Okay,
update
and the
by
committee
this
stuff,
week,
okay.
and then about where they stand this year, and then next week, you'll see the same document with what the, any, staff initiatives.
okay, thank you. Any other questions? All right, are you good? Okay, so let's move on. Thanks so much for that conversation. I think it was well needed.
Thank
Feel you
you.
got everything you need?
Yep.
That's what I thought. Next item?
10, reports of village officials, village president.
Oh, hello. I don't have anything except I'm going to defer to the village manager in her update on, there was a question about conversion therapy and when it would be scheduled, and so I just wanted her to do that in her report, so I don't have anything further.
And the response is June 3rd.
And the response is June 3rd. Okay, for the conversion therapy, so.
Correct.
We think,
What
I
Yeah, don't we still
think,
say
I
the
don't
same
know that
questions?
that's correct.
Okay, well, here's what I will do, just so you know, like a pulse, because whether it's conversion therapy or something else, so it's hard to keep track of all of them. So I spreadsheet it, I know.
We talked about
Sometimes it's the only way I can try to keep track of it.
Well, Chris did that.
So, and, you know, they're based upon what we have coming up for meetings, you know, stuff slots in, so that, I can send that out to you, so whether it's this issue or some other issue, no, it's a forecasting sheet, right? So what I can share with you is that right up until the week before the meeting, stuff changes, and then you gotta ebb and flow, like whatever that is, but, Nathan's gonna be working on that and,
That memo.
correct.
Okay. So you're gonna send that out? Is that what you're doing?
Yep,
Okay.
and just know that it's my
It's
working
fluctuating.
copy, so it's subject to change daily, but
We
you
have a
can
hard time
just see my
getting
notes
these
and
in.
where,
We have to push
what I'm
these.
thinking through.
from village trustees.
I have a report. Last week, on Wednesday, I think a group from Shorewood Moving Forward went up to Cedarburg to look at a facility called the Student Union, which is for, it's right in the main district of Cedarburg, and it's for middle school or high school kids. It's a place to go after school. There's like a coffee bar there, and you can buy pizza and snacks. There's some comfy chairs to watch TV. There's homework and a lot of tutoring that happens afterwards. Also, there's like an art, it was a really neat institution, really neat facility. It was funded by primarily a church, and they had one, very generous donor who funded the build out of the space. And so we talked to the director, and anyway, it was like it would be a wonderful thing to have in Shorewood. And there was some discussion about like where it could be under my feeling is the rec department would be the perfect place to sort of house something like that. So anyway, it was an interesting trip. If you're up in Cedarburg, you get a chance it'd be worth stopping in. It would be a wonderful thing for kids that age, just to have a place to be, other than Metro Market and the library.
Right, and just to share, I don't know if you all heard, but when I first took office as the president, I did speak with the library director, and she referenced Wauwatosa, who has a teen living room, they're called, but it's housed in the library. We don't have enough space at this time, but our library director had mentioned that to me, and I know we're getting a big donation that the library board's now considering what they're going to utilize that donation for. Is that what I saw in one of your updates? But anyways, that may be a place to consider it. I don't know how we get that to the library board, but it definitely was a thing that Rachel was bringing to my attention, very similar to the Cedarburg. And because the library is influxed with the tweens from middle school, especially on early, and they just aren't equipped for 40 students at a time. So that, I know that was a big push of hers too. I don't know how that gets into the process, but. Okay, anything else?
Oh, well, related, trustee Amenta and I were at the Shorewood Moving Forward meeting, was it 2 weeks ago? And trustee Ward was there too. Was anybody else there before I?
I know, I do that too.
So we were all there, and among other things, they discussed there was a group of Shorewood students that are planning a unity rally for May 31st, and I invited them to come to the village board meeting tonight. I guess they couldn't meet it, so maybe they'll come to our next one just to give us the details and invite us to participate and all that. So
Excellent, thank you.
Okay, 11B, considered review of penalties on late property tax payments and general process for notification of the same requested by trustee Amenta.
Oh, yeah, we all got an email from somebody who, and I was just hoping that we could have a discussion in finance committee to understand, like, I actually don't pay the property tax, my husband does, like, what are the dates, if you're, because my impression, and I've heard this from this resident and also another resident complained to me, that they kind of forgot, I guess they forgot the second payment was due, it just slipped their mind and there was no notification, and then they get a notice. So I just want to understand like what the process is, and is there a place. I didn't understand from Mark's memo if we are charging the extra 0.5% or if we're not. And also, I'm not necessarily thinking we want to change it, but just notify somebody. So if you've forgotten and you're late, you at least get some kind of notification from the village that we're charging you interest and a penalty,
I think it's worth discussing at committee, because there's other things that maybe it's, you could sign up for that, like if you want to get notified through an email, so it's not mailing, but whatever, but I think it's worth discussing and
I
understanding.
will comment on it. So I think prior to me taking over the clerk's office, they did not mail delinquent notices to people. So this last year, we do mail them. So if they have, after their first installment, have missed it, we don't mail reminders for anybody that's on the installment plan to remind them that they have an installment coming up, but if they've missed that true first payment or that second installment or the last installment, We do mail them reminders so that it doesn't wait till August when it rolls to the county and they have months and months and
And a
months
huge
of
penalty.
penalties because it's huge. So we are proactively mailing to people
So
now.
what was this person complaining about?
This is prior to, I think, I don't think it was this year. I think it was previous.
Well,
I
can we just?
did not
can you
receive the
make a motion
complaint, but I will
to-
say
Yeah, why
that.
don't we just defer it?
Yeah, can you just make a motion to
Or
put it on the
refer.
agenda?
Yeah, I'll just make a motion to refer to Finance Committee, just a review of the delinquent property tax process, notification process, and, yeah.
Okay.
That wasn't-
So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We're in adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. We got out of here by 10:34. I was gonna hard stop it at 10:30, but
We're so close.
so close.
Wait, wait.
I just didn't say two of those sentences.